This program is made possible by the loyal financial support of the friends and partners of Family Policy Institute.
You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world.
Good evening and welcome to the program. We're at the South African Law Reform Commission workshop, Sexual Offences, Children and Pornography. And we've just been involved in a session here in the workshop, and I'm standing with Deline Clark from the Law Reform Commission and Advocate Mankis, who is the project leader on this project. So, Deline, I want to start to help our viewers understand what is the South African Law Reform Commission and what does it do?
Well, the purpose of the Law Reform Commission is to review legislation, to draft new legislation, and to anticipate the need for legislation.
Okay. So what are you doing with this particular draft amendment bill and this discussion paper, Sexual Offences, Children and Pornography?
So what we're doing is we're investigating in law whether the current law that we have is adequate to protect children from being exposed to pornography, and in cases where children are being used to create child sexual abuse material.
Now, don't we already have laws in our statute books like the Sexual Offences Act and the Film and Publication Act? Don't we have that already?
Yes, we do, and they are acknowledged as best practice in a number of countries when we look at our legislation. But we have problems with implementation, and also there are areas that we need to improve on.
Okay. So you're trying to put bring all these different laws under one banner, under one law or one bill.
That's correct, yes. We're trying to create one statute or one law by the name of the Sexual Offences Act to encapsulate all sexual offences.
Yeah, and being through the workshop now, I recognized that there were a number of provisions that were left out, a couple of things that were not fully explained to deal with the kind of issues like grooming children, the manufacture of child pornography, or what do you call it? The amendment is going to call it something else now?
Child sexual abuse material.
Child sexual abuse material. So you think that is a better explanation for child pornography, because it encapsulates everything. Even people drawing images would be considered, and if it's of a sexual or erotic nature of a child, a depiction, that would also be a criminal offense.
That's currently an offense already, but what we're doing is actually, by way of the definition, is calling it what it is. These are really images of child sexual abuse.
Okay, so we at this workshop, you're traveling around the country, inviting people to make comment on this amendment bill and the discussion paper. So, but what do you want from the public? How can they help you achieve your objective?
Well, we went through this whole process of raising issues, publishing an issue paper, inviting comments, and we're now at the stage where we really hope we have found some solutions and we can put forward things that people can consider and decide whether it really addresses the issues they might have had with the law as it stands. Yeah,
you're depending a lot on the public here, because you're asking people their opinion. Several times you ask the public, look, we're not sure, should we go this far? We're not sure, should we put this language in? So you really do need the public's input in this. But now, how do you help people that they are concerned about children being exposed to pornography and they want it stopped, they want it dealt with, but people don't understand all these legalese? When they see documents like the discussion paper, they kind of glaze over. How do we make it simple for the ordinary person out there so they can participate and give their input? Because essentially it's what you want. You want more people to participate in this process.
Yes, I think the workshops serve to a large extent to make it simpler. And we do try to make use of language that makes it easier. So, for instance, those who are very concerned about children making self-images, we call it sexually explicit self-made images or something like that. But I think the people who attended the workshop today know that we are really grappling with this issue of teenagers especially making self-images and showing it to their friends, and how we are going to provide for that within legislation, and whether we are going to criminalize it, or are we decriminalizing it, or are we making it a lesser offense. We have a proposal of making it a non-offense in certain very limited circumstances. But it would be very nice for parents who are concerned about their children and what they are able to access, and what they are themselves doing, to have a look at this and see whether it might address their concerns.
Yeah, I think the big worry on most people's minds is most children now have a smart device, and most of them can access pornography, even hardcore pornography, on their smart devices. There isn't much regulation. There is protections coming from people like Vodacom and everything, but I don't think most people are even aware of that. Would this bill or this amendment address those issues as well, Delene?
I think the discussion paper not only makes legislative recommendations, so changes to the law, we're also making non-legislative recommendations, which are practical things. Awareness making. We are including the Department of Basic Education. We're looking at including input into the life orientation input. So it's not just a one-size-fits-all.
Okay. I think that's one of the most important things, is the public awareness and the education and training, because so many children are being caught out. We know that pornographers are targeting children online. Because of the curiosity factor, they're attracting these children's attention, get them hooked on pornography. And we look at the stats in South Africa. Child-on-child sexual abuse is a rising crime in this country. And so is this amendment, this bill, the education, and all other things you guys are working on going to address all of those issues?
We really hope so. We have made quite a number of proposals with reference to a variety of departments. And of course, I do think the provision dealing with the clean feed option, in terms of which no device may be handed to a child that is unblocked for pornography or child sexual abuse material, that may not happen, and it will be an offence. And you can ask for unblocking that device if you can prove you are 18 years and older. And maybe those kind of provisions will assist parents who are concerned about what their children are able to access, so as to maybe have a good night's rest.
Yeah, I think that's most parents want a good night's rest. And I think more and more parents and adults are concerned about what they see in the media, on social media, with children being exposed, being groomed, being lured, all these kind of things. So it is a scary thing. The internet it's a wonderful tool, but it also can be abused, and it has been abused quite a lot. So the invitation for public comment on this discussion paper, Children and Pornography, is still open on your website, the South African Law Reform Commission, and the deadline date is the 30th of July. And you want people to go to the website, look at the amendment bill, and say if they support the amendments, they think it's good, or they want to add. Am I summing that up correctly, Delene?
Absolutely. We're really wanting to engage people on these issues. So if they find something different, they have an innovative idea, something we haven't thought of, please bring it to our attention.
So there you have it. We're going to put the South African Law Reform Commission's website address on the screen right now. Please go there, look for the discussion paper, Children and Pornography. Read through the amendment bill and give your comments. It doesn't have to be 30 pages. It can be a 1 or 2 pager, but we want as wide as possible participation from the public in South Africa, so that they need your help. They're doing a great job. Delene and Advocate Mankis are doing a great job with their team, but they need all of us to come together and just add whatever you've been led to contribute to this process. Please do so. Next up, we're going to show you some of the presentations. Family Policy Institute is facing formidable battles for faith, for family, and for religious freedoms in South Africa. We need your help. We cannot do this on our own. We need your help to stand with us, to push back against what's coming against the Christian faith, what's coming against the natural family, and what's coming against our religious freedoms. please subscribe to our newsletter by going to our website, familypolicyinstitute.com, and subscribing today to our website so I can keep you informed with critical information about how you can join us in pushing back against the darkness. Subscribe now.
See the world in style with Joy and Yeich magazines on our 13-day luxury Christian cruise to Portugal, Morocco, Italy, Spain and France. Holiday with other believers as you fly from South Africa and see the beautiful buildings of Barcelona, shop the colourful markets of Marrakesh and walk the cobbled streets of Lisbon. Sample fresh pasta in Portofino as you sail aboard a 17-story cruise ship and enjoy 4 meals a day, land tours, entertainment, daily devotions and more with our pastor. Email info@joytravel.co.za or call 021 852 4061 for more. But hurry, places are limited.
Good morning. I am, thank you, going to start off. Really, my focus is taking the conversation into the online world, giving you some kind of an idea of the size of the challenge when we start talking about the internet, giving you an idea of how successful we are being as a country with connecting people and children to the internet, and then looking specifically at the legislative proposals in the forms of amendments to the Sexual Offences Act, which the Commission is proposing in its discussion paper, and one of the rationales for why we're here today. So that's just a graphic for you that's taken from about a year ago, just to give you an indication of what happens on the internet in 1 minute. So we're talking here about 60 seconds, okay? In 60 seconds, and you have to kind of suspend belief when you look at these numbers. In 60 seconds, 266,000 hours of Netflix are watched. Okay, so every minute, we in the world watch 266,000 hours of Netflix. We send 38 million WhatsApps. We send 8 million text messages. We log into Facebook 973,000 times every 60 seconds. Okay? Anyone know what Tinder is? The online dating app. 1.1 million swipes every 60 seconds. Okay? And there's a particularly interesting one there. YouTube shows that every 60 seconds, 4.3 million videos are watched. Okay? If we turn that around, okay, where does that video content on YouTube come from? It comes from us, from most of us. We get a YouTube account or we upload videos onto YouTube. And if we look at that, then a truly stunning statistic is that according to YouTube, Google, every minute 500 hours of content is uploaded onto the YouTube platform. Okay? So we're watching 4.3 million videos every minute, but we're actually uploading 500 hours every minute. And if you extrapolate those numbers, it gets truly scary. So if it's 500 hours a minute, it's 30,000 hours per hour. It's 720,000 hours per day. And if you want to do the maths and divide it down, that is approximately 82.2 years of video content uploaded to YouTube every single day. Okay, the challenge in terms of the amount of content that is out there is absolutely immense. We've taken those numbers just to emphasize the point a little bit further. So if you take those numbers, you scale them out to a month, they're going to give you numbers that anyone, not just the former president, is going to have trouble saying out aloud in public. Okay, that is 8 quadrillion emails sent that we're talking about. So when we talk about the internet, we need to firstly be aware of the massive scale of what we're talking about. How are we doing in South Africa in terms of giving people access to the internet? Well, we're doing reasonably well. This graph and the figures I'm talking about are from the Stats SA General Household Survey for 2018, which was released about 2 weeks ago. And you'll see firstly that a huge number of people actually have access. So we're talking now in 2019 about only approximately 3.4% households in South Africa which do not have some form of access to the internet. It could be very limited because of having a non-smart device or because of the cost of access. And the second thing to note is that the majority of that access is taking place through a mobile phone. Okay, so in a place like Mpumalanga on the top line there, in that household, 96.5% of households only have access through a mobile phone. So the fixed lines that we come from, those are disappearing, and increasingly we are becoming a mobile country that uses mobile devices to access the internet. Just a bit more context here. The issues we're talking about today are global issues. They're international trends in terms of trying to deal with certain undesirable content, illegal content on the internet. This is happening around the world. And in particular, I want to emphasize that there is an immense amount of adult content, pornography, available on the internet, okay, on social media, on the World Wide Web. And it's important to realize that a lot of that content is there because of a commercial strategy which is being employed. We've heard about big tobacco, we've heard about big alcohol, big pharma. There is also big porn, and it mainly finds expression in the form of a company called MindGeek, which controls 80 to 90% of the porn which is actually placed on the internet. In the United Kingdom, that's probably the most interesting jurisdiction at the moment in terms of steps they're taking. So they're proposing what is called a porn blocker clean feed system, which will be implemented on the 15th of July, although it has been delayed a couple of times due to implementation difficulties. And essentially what they're saying is that if you try to go to an adult website, you will see a landing page with no adult content on it, and you will not be able to proceed past that landing page until you have in fact taken the required steps to verify your age. That could be in the form of going into your local greengrocers, your Sainsbury's, and showing them your ID documents, credit cards, in order to prove that you are over the age of 18. But you will need to have that verification processed before you are actually able to proceed to view the adult content. So we'll be watching the implementation of that program in the United Kingdom with a great deal of interest. It is the first such initiative anywhere in the world. Okay, is this a new issue? No. That's the cover of Time magazine from the 3rd of July, 1995. Okay, 25 years ago, there was magazine covers talking about the issue of porn on the internet. Has anywhere actually progressed with a workable solution to date? The answer is no. We'll watch how the United Kingdom does, but currently no one's actually got it right to solve this challenge. What are we proposing? Firstly, it was clear from the previous workshops and the consultations around the issue paper and the research which has been done that South Africans, in responding to the Law Reform Commission, held a very strong view that the ICT industry, so the internet service providers, the mobile networks, the platforms like Google, social media, that they had a role to play and that they needed to do more to step up to meeting the challenge, given that they were an essential intermediary between children and the pornography which is available online. So we've got proposals there which I'm going to just take you through about creating new offences in the Sexual Offences Act, enticement to view or making child sexual abuse material or pornography accessible to children, misleading techniques. So often, and you still find this, although it was far more rife in the early days of the internet, you will use a false link that essentially represents that it is harmless content when it in fact links to adult content or harmful, inappropriate content. And then we're also talking about what it is that people in the ICT industry and others, what are their obligations when they come across child sexual abuse material in terms of reporting and interacting with law enforcement authorities. Right, so this is the proposed section 19 capital A sub 1 to go into the Sexual Offences Act, quite straightforward. A person who unlawfully and intentionally advertises, provides access to, or distributes to a child or entices that child to view adult content or child sexual abuse material through any means with or without that child's consent, so consent is utterly irrelevant here from the child's perspective, would be guilty of the offense of enticing a child to view child sexual abuse material or pornography. Okay? Largely mirrors existing provisions with some refinements. Then focusing on persons generally, but very specifically looking at a manufacturer of technology, a distributor of technology and devices, and electronic communications service providers. Just to note, who is an electronic communications service provider? It's the legal term to cover ISP. So a person, including a manufacturer or distributor or an electronic communications service provider who unlawfully and intentionally provides a child with or allows a child to engage with any form of technology or device, including a mobile phone, that is capable of accessing the internet, social media, or other digital content without ensuring that the default setting blocks access to child sexual abuse material and pornography, would be guilty of an offense. So there's some frowns in front of me, so we're all clear in very simple language. We're saying, hey, Mr. Vodacom, you can't distribute, hand out a mobile phone to anyone where that phone is actually capable of accessing adult content or child sexual abuse material. Is this a complete prohibition? No, because like in the UK, we're proposing that if I, myself, being an adult, do want to watch adult content, I would be able to take that device and I would be able to remove that block by proving that I am over the age of 18, and then I would have access to that content that I would want to have a look at. Be aware that while we're focusing on ISPs, on platforms, on the Vodacoms of this world, we are talking also about persons. So if I as an adult who's had that block removed, then hand that phone over to my child in order to use without actually taking steps to put the block back, I am going to be potentially guilty of this offense. It would be pointless to institute a block without creating some measures around people trying to circumvent that block, because that will absolutely happen. So these in section 19 capital A2, this really tries to say that if you unlawfully and intentionally try to circumvent, uninstall, remove the block in an improper manner, then you are going to be guilty of an offense. And furthermore, we're proposing that when the block is removed, so I go to Vodacom and I say, please remove my block, they must keep a register, and it would be an offense for them not to keep a register of my details. Why? So that they can actually prove they've acted correctly in allowing me access to that content, and there is some kind of a trail. Okay, not only unlawful and intentional, we're also looking at a negligence-based offense here. So exactly the same thing, except that you have failed to take reasonable steps to ensure that a child is not able to access adult content or child sexual abuse material. Misleading techniques. A person who unlawfully and intentionally creates or uses any technique, so including embedding words or digital images into source codes of websites. Lots of technical speak that can come in here because people are very clever about how they do this. the essence of this is you intend to deceive a child into viewing or being exposed to child sexual abuse material or pornography, you would be guilty of an offense. This is a provision which is currently found in many jurisdictions around the world. And then on the reporting side, if I am Vodacom, if I am MWeb, MTN, and I become aware that my systems or facilities are being used to host child sexual abuse material, or it's being transmitted or accessed through my system, then I have an obligation to immediately report that offense to SAPS. I have obligations to preserve any evidence which might be available to me, because there is going to be an investigation, and when SAPS come and knock on my door, I want to make sure that I have all relevant information available to them once they have presented the correct legal process. I must comply with lawful written instructions and then balance between taking steps to block access to that content, so I don't want anyone else to see it, but at the same time SAPS may want to conduct further investigations, and therefore they say, please don't block access to that content because we want to see who else is trying to access that content. This is, given the context of a world which is grappling with content control issues and not doing it very well. We haven't been successful at meeting the challenges anywhere to date. We'll watch the UK. What we are proposing is fairly revolutionary, and it needs to be properly ventilated. And the kind of issues which we are seeking as the Commission from you today, could be absolutely general thoughts. It could be your experience of 25 years or 15 years of dealing with pornography. It could be a particular view you have that maybe we are overstepping our mandate, and there are concerns about freedom of expression and other rights which we need to take into account here, and dangers which such an approach could raise.
Family Policy Institute is facing formidable battles for faith, for family, and for religious freedoms in South Africa. We need your help. We cannot do this on our own. We need your help to stand with us, to push back against what's coming against the Christian faith, what's coming against the natural family, and what's coming against our religious freedoms. Please subscribe to our newsletter by going to our website, familypolicyinstitute.com, and subscribing today to our website so I can keep you informed with critical information about how you can join us in pushing back against the darkness. Subscribe now.
See the world in style with Joy and Yeich magazines on our 13-day luxury Christian cruise to Portugal, Morocco, Italy, Spain and France. Holiday with other believers as you fly from South Africa and see the beautiful buildings of Barcelona, shop the colourful markets of Marrakesh and walk the cobbled streets of Lisbon. Sample fresh pasta in Portofino as you sail aboard a 17-story cruise ship and enjoy 4 meals a day, land tours, entertainment, daily devotions and more with our pastor. Email info@joytravel.co.za or call 021 852 4061 for more. But hurry, places are limited.
Welcome back to the program. My guest in the studio is Clive Human of STOP, or Standing Together to Oppose Pornography. Clive, always great to have you in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you, Errol. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Now, both of us was at the South African Law Reform Commission workshop in Cape Town, talking about the discussion paper and draft bill, Children and Pornography. Now, I know this is close to your heart. It's mine too.
Yeah.
Because currently too many children are being exposed to pornography, online pornography, on computers, and mostly to handheld devices like this. Just about every child has got one of these things, and they can access it so easily. So the Law Reform Commission is doing a great job, especially with this draft bill under the leadership of Delene Clark, to strengthen legislation so that we put things in place that will better protect children from exposure to pornography?
I think they're doing a great job, and it's a very necessary job. They're looking at the Film and Publications Bill and the Sexual Offences Act and updating it. There's terminology, there's new terminology with the expansion of the electronics market,
Yes.
and the various areas of media. It's so needed, to be able to tighten up and to be more relevant for today, and to be in line with what overseas people are talking
Other
about.
nations are doing. But beside that, they did mention in the workshop that there is little bits of legislation or sections of other legislation that deals with children and the protection of children. And what they want to do is make one bill that covers all these aspects instead of having it fragmented and all over the show. So they're strengthening it and putting more and more things into place. So Jonathan Cowell's presentation is quite alarming, quite frightening, in that there's so much content on the internet and it's so difficult to block all of the stuff out to protect children from exposure. And these pornographic merchants, these porn merchants, they target children to get them addicted, to make customers out of them. And there's so many young children, working with children, speaking at schools, and all the great work you do, Clive, that we've got to do more to protect children from exposure to pornography.
Correct.
So the bill is suggesting certain things that government should do, and one of the suggestions is that they put a block on the internet, a filter on the internet at tier 1 level, so that we block out all the X-rated content. And if adults want to opt in, they have to register and prove that they're adults before they can opt in to view pornography. But this also is not foolproof, according to Jonathan, because there are still ways children can get access. So what is the main thing you think, Clive, that parents should be considering to reverse this trend of more and more children being exposed to pornography?
Errol, as you said, the content is alarming, and it is, and I know from my first-hand experience dealing with children. And remember, in South Africa, you're a child until you're 18 years of age.
That's right.
So it's important that parents get involved in this. And yes, I think it's a great idea, and I know Britain are going to be implementing this opting in and opting out, so that all cell phones, electronic devices, computers will not have access to pornography on the internet. And then once you've bought it, you can go in and register, and you'll be kept on a register. Your name will be kept on a register for that device. And then if you do hand it to a child, you could be liable for abuse with that child, etc. So yes, it will have its teething factors, and it will be a difficult mission to control, let's put it like that. But I think it's anything which will help to filter the content of pornography and all the other cyber negatives out there that will filter it from children, because a lot of children are not actively seeking it out. They're coming across it by accident while they're doing research, while they're doing work. And for them to be exposed to this, it's traumatic. And I know of cases where young kids, 7, 8 years of age, have been doing work on the computer, and they've come across really hardcore pornography, and it's been such a shock to them that they have been, they show the same traumatic symptoms of a child that has been sexually abused. So it is important that parents take control, and when they hand over a device to their kids, because no kid can go and sign a cell phone contract, you've got to be 18 and plus. So you're handing your kid, and often parents are getting a new phone, and I don't need all that, you take it, I'll take the old one, that type of thing. They should be aware that they must put blocks in, and they are. Certain of the service providers will block into, porn, adult material content. They will block it, quite easily.
So what you're saying is then the first and most important line of defense for children is parents.
Correct.
So parents have to be more aware, more diligent, not just handing their child a device,
a loaded gun,
a smartphone, without putting in the necessary software to protect children from hardcore pornographic material. Because Vodacom, MTN, all these service providers, they do have sort of applications that you can
Very simple.
load down onto the phone to protect, to make sure that children are not getting and cannot access
Yes.
hardcore pornographic material.
And as I say, you know, the kids today are so tech savvy that if they really want to find it, as you said, as you know, it's been discussed at that meeting, you know, they will find a way of getting through to it. But you want to block those poor innocent kids who are absolutely traumatized by coming across stuff like that. So parents have to start with themselves and speak age appropriately to their children. Maybe even, you know, the younger they are, make some sort of internet pledge where, you know, if they see anything that upsets them on the internet, to come and tell you. Tell them about good pictures, bad pictures, things like that, which will, you know, because the internet is a great tool, it really is, but obviously it's been a large
Now,
part
Clive,
of it.
just talking about that, you are available to speak at churches, at schools, because of your experience and your vast knowledge of pornography and how children and adults get access to it and what it does to marriages, what it does to families. This is really a terrible, terrible tool of the enemy to destroy and undermine marriages, families, and the lives of children. Now we know from the stats that we're getting from Childline and other organizations that children getting access to pornography, hardcore pornography, is driving up the stats of child-on-child sexual abuse.
time.
So children are now raping other children. Sexual assaults of children on children is rising in this country as a result of the increased exposure to pornography on smartphones. It's mainly online, right?
It's all online, and if you think about it, in certain areas, especially the rural areas, the only access to the internet is a smartphone. So there's no computers, and it's mainly the smartphone. But kids, if you think about, okay, I won't even think, when I was young, you know, you go to a cowboy and crook movie, you're a kid, you come out, you play cowboys and crooks, or Star Wars, you know, you want your saber sword. You're imitating what you're seeing in that movie. So now kids have access, or parents leave it lying around, or some parents even watch pornography with their kids in the background. You know, it is frightening. You know, some parents just don't think. And kids are now imitating what they see in that pornography. So it's not a sexual act. It's just imitating what they're seeing. But it's traumatic for that child, for those children. It's absolutely traumatic. So parents have to take control in their homes.
So Clive, with the high rates of children accessing pornography online, are there applications and software that can help parents, you know, where they could download to their computers, to their iPads, to their smartphones, so that they can protect their children from exposure to pornography?
Yeah, they are. And, you know, I'm very excited to say last year, I think sometime, there's a crowd called imemovement.co.za. They have one of the top parental control systems available in South Africa, and you pay in South Africa. I think it's 65 Rand a month, and you can load it onto 5 different devices. And that will not only block pornography or sexually explicit material, it would also show you the number of hours spent on the internet. It'll also show, you know, so you can, because kids with gaming and all that stuff, they spend an absolute huge amount of time on the internet. And this will be able to just give you a feedback of, is it healthy, is it unhealthy, where they're going, what they're doing. So I think that is a great tool that parents can use.
What is the website address? IME Movement?
imemovement.co.za.
So it's imemovement.co.za. So parents can go there, get information, download this. You pay 65 Rand a month, and you can download each family to 5 different devices.
Yes.
And it gives parents the ability to monitor how long children are spending on the internet, on various devices. But there is a filter, there's a block that prevents access to sexually explicit material.
And I think the system they use was voted in America last year as the top parental filter in the
Wow.
States last year. So it's a quality system.
So there you are. We have a great tool in South Africa, imemovement.co.za, which you can go to and download to your devices, paying 65 Rand a month, and 65 Rand a month to protect your children from access to hardcore porn is nothing. And I think most
It's a hamburger a month.
Absolutely. Vodacom also has applications and the other service providers. So use whatever you can, because we have to begin to address this crisis. And I call it a crisis because it is. That's why the Law Reform Commission is busy with this, addressing this issue, because so many children are getting access to it, and the fallout in our society is horrendous.
You know, Errol, what's so sad as well, the whole of, everything from music videos, etc., it's all grooming our children into very, and I'm not anti-sex or anything like that, that's a God-given gift between a husband and a wife, etc. But the way that the media is grooming our children into sexual activity, I've spoken to young girls, early teens and they feel so pressurized to have to act out because that's what the media, otherwise you're not one of the cool kids, whereas, we know that it's a precious commodity that God has given us, to share with the person in your life.
And it's been perverted. We see on social media how young girls are targeted. We see that all over. Even in our schools, there's this program, Comprehensive Sexuality Education, which is a tool used by sexual rights activists to get to children, to bypass parents, to get to children, to sexualize them,
Absolutely.
to indoctrinate them with certain ideas that is in conflict with biblical values. And so there's an onslaught against our children in South Africa.
Yes.
This is not exaggeration, it's an onslaught. If you
I
look
mean,
at the porn industry, you look at comprehensive sexuality education, you look at the media, magazines like Teen Vogue that's teaching children how to do certain sex acts and all kinds of things. So again, we come back to this, Clive, that it's the parents. It's the responsibility. They're the first line of defense to protect their own children, and God holds us responsible as parents to take care and protect our children and teach them what is right and what is wrong. And parents have to be a lot more diligent.
Yeah.
And so the IME movement, it's on your screen now. You can go there and you can download the software to protect your children, protect your family, and to monitor what is happening in your nation. We're living in an era where there's so much content being thrown at children that it's remarkable. But we have to do a lot more than we're currently doing to protect our children. And I think there's a number of applications and software in the country to do that. Please make an effort to go and look for that and download it onto your devices. Also, go to the South African Law Reform Commission website on your screen right now and look for their discussion paper, Children and Pornography. Read, it's about 5 or 6 pages, the draft bill, what it's saying about strengthening legislation to protect children from exposure. And please make a comment on that. You have until the end of July to comment on the SA Law Reform Commission discussion paper, Children and Pornography. I hope you do it. Stay with us, don't go away. Family Policy Institute is facing formidable battles for faith, for family, and for religious freedoms in South Africa. We need your help. We cannot do this on our own. We need your help to stand with us, to push back against what's coming against the Christian faith, what's coming against the natural family, and what's coming against our religious freedoms. Please subscribe to our newsletter by going to our website, familypolicyinstitute.com, and subscribing today to our website so I can keep you informed with critical information about how you can join us in pushing back against the darkness. Subscribe now.
See the world in style with Joy and Yeich magazines on our 13-day luxury Christian cruise to Portugal, Morocco, Italy, Spain and France. Holiday with other believers as you fly from South Africa and see the beautiful buildings of Barcelona, shop the colourful markets of Marrakesh, and walk the cobbled streets of Lisbon. Sample fresh pasta in Portofino as you sail aboard a 17-story cruise ship and enjoy 4 meals a day, land tours, entertainment, daily devotions, and more with our pastor. Email info@joytravel.co.za or call 021 852 4061 for more. But hurry, places are limited.
One of the problems with this field is there are many who see child pornography or viewing child pornography as really this is a victimless crime. And one of the things that we really want to emphasize and ensure that people are aware of in this legislative reform process is that children are exploited and abused in order to make these images. And if there was no market for child pornography, these images would not be made. So every picture reflects a crime scene. And therefore, the very first thing that the Commission proposes is instead of the use of child pornography, which we will still use from time to time until people are used to the new term, we are using the term child sexual abuse material because it brings home to the reader that here is a scene of child sexual abuse and that there is a child behind this particular picture, book, audio, or whatever the material consists of. Changes in the actual legal definitions in the proposed draft bill will be discussed by Advocate Mainpiece. So there will be some changes to the definition of child pornography / child sexual abuse material. The other term that I want to alert you to is that we are using the term child sexual exploiter. And this term is being used in preference to using the term pedophile. Not all who commit offences against children can be called pedophiles, and certainly those who make child sexual abuse material are not necessarily exclusively attracted to children, which, as if you look at the definition of pedophile, essentially it is a person who is exclusively sexually attractive to children. One might even call it a sexual orientation. But some of these people may have mixed or wide sexual preferences or even be involved in making child sexual abuse material for profit, not necessarily because they have a sexual interest in children, because this is a lucrative market, very sadly. Just to look at some of the issues relating to child and the child pornography or child sexual abuse material or adult pornography and children's exposure to this. Levels of children's exposure to adult pornography are very high in South Africa. And levels of exposure range from 24% for the 9 to 11-year-old age group, believe it or not, to 72% for the 15 to 17-year-old children, among those who have access to the internet. Now, Dominique will talk about the very high percentage of people in South Africa who do have access to the internet, which is in the late 90s, 90%. So we see very high levels of exposure to adult pornography in this country as far as children are concerned. And I just want to refer you, if you are interested, to Burton and others' research, which you can find on the Center for, I have a block about the name, Center for Justice and Crime Prevention website. www.cjcp.org.za. Okay, I can remember the acronym, but okay. Right, so when it comes to children, exposure may be both accidental and intentional. And that is also clear from Burton's research. Children are curious, they sometimes actively seek it out. Now, a lot has been said about the impact of exposing children to adult pornography, but we need to be extremely careful about how we interpret a lot of this data, because a lot of the research is based on prison populations, or in the case, well, certainly in the case of South Africa, prison populations, and in the case of young people, children who have been accused of, convicted of sexual crimes against other children. The research is based on children based in diversion programs. The problem is sexual offenders don't necessarily rush forward and say, I'm a sexual offender. This behavior is usually extremely hidden. And we really are touching just the tip of the iceberg, even with those cases that are reported. Again, another piece of Burton's research, 1 in 9 children report, and very, very few children acknowledge reporting to the system that is in place to deal with child protection. Another very interesting document to refer you to is the Optimus Foundation study on the prevalence of child abuse in South Africa. Again, you can just Google it, it will come up, and you will be amazed at the very low reporting to formal systems of any form of abuse whatsoever in this country. And it begs the question, what do we need to do about our systems to make them more child-friendly? When you do look at research, please look at it with a long eye. Obviously, if we have such high levels of exposure to child pornography in this country, to adult pornography in the country, there is not a direct causal link. It's probably an associated factor that is linked to other associated factors as well. And I'm not saying it's insignificant, but I am saying please look at research carefully, rather than, the panic statements that we often see. And a lot of that impact is mediated by good parenting. I really do believe that parents have an enormous role to play here. Research with adolescent offenders does indicate that exposure to sexual images of adults or children does have the potential to harm children and influence behavior. It's strongly associated with adolescent offending in children who come to the attention of the system. It's certainly not the only associated factor. Interestingly enough, the most strongly associated factor in Naidoo's research with adolescent sexual offending was exposure to domestic violence. Okay, and I see we have Gender Commission, we have a lot of people involved in the domestic violence field. But we do know that the involvement of children in making child sexual abuse material has a profound and negative impact on children and their adjustment as both children and adults, their psychosocial health, apart from the physical risks. And when a child knows that material has been created, this compounds the negative sequelae of sexual abuse. In my work with children, children are horrified that other people have to look at these pictures of them in a sexual situation. And although many children I've worked with do not really understand fully the issue of sexual abuse, most certainly the issues around the impact of being involved in making of this material are complex and very traumatizing. I also want to draw attention to the fact that children involved in the making of child sexual material when it emerges, when it is disclosed, the non-offending parents are extremely traumatized, as well as other caregivers and other close family members, such as siblings. So when we're dealing with these children, not only do we need to work with the child, there needs to be some service afforded to the parent as well, because often their trauma is equal, if not greater, than the trauma of the child, because they have an adult understanding of what their child has been involved in. So this is really very important. I also want to talk about discovery. Often colleagues will talk about the necessity of discovering who these children are. Discovery can also be extremely traumatic for a child who may have put the abuse aside and got on with their life. They may have repressed a lot of the memory relating to this and some of the trauma related to this. I can think of one child in Pietermaritzburg who was abused as quite a small child and was traced because she was actually picked up by someone in a car, taken to a cane field and abused, and the abuser filmed his abuse of the child. She was traced because she was wearing her school uniform. She was traced 7 years later. She was so traumatized by the fact that she had been found. She'd never disclosed to her parents. She'd never told anybody about what had happened to her. The discovery was a very traumatic event in her life, a very traumatic event for her parents as well. And so once again, discovery of the child involved in the making of child sexual abuse material can be a traumatic event. So I want to talk about services. Annika is going to talk about the need for service providers to work together as a team so that children and traumatized others do not fall through the cracks and then have less availability in terms of being able to cope with the legal processes. I also just want to mention that I've worked with many children who were not aware of being filmed when they were abused. With advances in technology such as sophisticated cellular telephones and webcams, some children do not realize that the open computer over there, that tiny little green light, is recording exactly what is happening to them. And so one needs to be very aware of this as well. And I think that with police investigation of child sexual abuse material, it really is very important to always look at the possibility that child sexual abuse material has been made or developed. The other thing that I must draw out from my past experience is children who disclose abuse may disclose abuse, but not necessarily disclose that they are aware that they were filmed during the abuse because of the embarrassment of being seen naked or in a compromising position. This often emerges, children don't disclose everything all at once. Disclosure for most children is a process. And so often you find that everything's underway and suddenly a child will say, court case is coming up. I'm so scared that this will also kind of emerge as the case goes on. So we do want to emphasize safety and awareness. At the point of discovery of child sexual abuse material, but also safety and awareness from the point of view of primary prevention. And we have included both preventive and response measures in the draft bill, as well as non-legislative recommendations. And we would really like comment on this. I'm delighted to see a colleague from Basic Education. There are a number of recommendations around basic education, and I'm sure basic education is going to look at that with long eyes because teachers have far too many responsibilities, okay? And so we do request, if you go into the full transcript of the discussion paper, we do ask you to look at the pages 123/4 and page 270, where we have non-legislative proposals that might contribute to the prevention of exposure of children to pornography and protect them from involvement in the creation of child abuse material and facilitate recovery from negative impacts if exposure or involvement occurs. So please have a look at those non-legislative proposals as well. Obviously, they will not be binding as in law, but they may bring an enormous value to this investigation.